Welcome back to another episode of Inclusively. In this series, we'll be asking the question, how has the pandemic helped change people's lives? And what lessons we have learned that could make the post-pandemic world more inclusive? I'm your host, Laurindo Garcia.
And I'm Petrina Kow. Welcome. Today's theme is all about work, and I think all of us have been, probably in our lives, this is the area that has had the biggest shifts and biggest sort of seismic movements for most of us who have been working. And for me, at least, I feel like, it kind of dawned on me with the work that I do. It's like, oh, I could have been doing this all my life. Why didn't I do this before? And I'm very blessed, and I'm very, very grateful that I'm still able to do a lot of work in this time. And so for me, it's been really interesting just finding new audiences, finding new clients internationally, which is something I would never have thought to kind of pursue. But then it's like, oh, yeah, I can have a Canadian client. Yeah, I can. I can have clients from all over the world because now I can see them, in this way. So it's been really interesting for me just to kind of broaden my idea of what work can be like.
At my end, I feel I'm pretty privileged. I've been working remotely and working in remote teams for the past 16 years. So I'm feeling kind of comfortable in a setup like this. But what has been the real disruption at home is my husband has now been working at home for the first time, and he's in broadcast media. And they never thought that he and his teams would be shifting to working from home. So now we're having to work out how to navigate and share the space together at home. And so for this podcast, I had to kick him out and kind of move him to the other area because this is the better sounding room. So it's been interesting for him, and he's already going into the 3-month period because they started quite early. But all in all, it's been pretty good. We've been both very productive, and I'm feeling kind of lucky. And I know not everybody has that same situation.
I'm very excited to get right into it because we've got a packed show. We have got 5 guests in the show today. And, apart from looking at small businesses and, medium to large enterprises, we're also going to be talking to a lawyer in Singapore to think about how the legal system has continued through this lockdown and this period. I suppose like virtual courtrooms and things like that. And we'll also be speaking to a marketing executive who's led a transition from brainstorming in person to brainstorming in isolation and having to make decisions that way. So it's all going to be very, very exciting.
Plus, we'll have an executive director of a non-for-profit who's been helping women from low-income families gain employment. This is Carrie Tan from Daughters of Tomorrow. Carrie will be offering a perspective on how the workforce of the future in a post-pandemic world could be more inclusive. And finally, we'll also be having a guest artist today, the jazz songwriter and performer, Miss Lu.
Yeah, but to kick us off, I'd like to introduce our very first guest. She is the CEO and co-founder of a lovely co-working space here in Singapore and in the region. And I think there is talks of expansion. The Great Room, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Jaelle Ang. Hello. Hi, Jaelle.
Hi.
So tell me, I mean, you're in a way, as a co-working space, you've kind of been the solution, right, in a way to sort of deal with that transition between sort of traditional offices and people wanting to be a little bit more nimble and not have to deal with like massive overheads and catering to that kind of group of people. But for you guys too, you've had to kind of do the lockdown and people can't gather in those office spaces anymore. What has been the experience for you guys in this pandemic?
It's been very interesting because our business has been so much about creating a beautiful physical space that people want to be in. They want to be very productive in. They want to connect with people, impress their clients, and kind of attract like-minded people. And all of a sudden, they can't come in anymore. They can't make that connection and impression that they needed to. So who are we and what's our value continuing from this point? I think what's interesting is that we've learned that we're actually more than just a physical space. We are a community. Then how then do we justify and push the boundaries on the notion of community, help them perform at their best or continue to engage and have these dialogues with people? So it's been quite a learning journey, but I think we've done quite a few experiments to help people either work better. So we've created Zoom backgrounds for people who still want to show that they're in a very nice workspace, very productive workspace. It's gone viral. That really helped them. We've worked with people to help the members nail virtual meetings, so how to build rapport with other people. So really just trying to, build that same value without having that physical space.
And I mean, for your clients, or obviously your tenants in the space, have they come to you with any sort of specific requests or difficulties or things that they've sort of come experience for themselves, and you as perhaps the provider had to sort of respond to that you were not expecting?
The biggest thing, what's interesting is that flex workspace, our main proposition has always been about flexibility. And the big hypothesis or the big estimate is by 2030, 30% of all commercial workspaces would be in flex workspaces. And what the pandemic has done, it's become a catalyst, or it's accelerated this, moving toward 30%. So we've already known that it's a good counteract to shorter business cycles, more market volatility, but it's going to propel us to work towards that even faster. And the conversations that we have, the dialogue that we have with business owners and leaders are, we don't know what's going to happen. Are we planning for 3 months, 6 months, or 2 years? How many headcount are we going to have? Are we planning for growth or downsides? Which geographies are we going to have? Are we planning for business continuity, or is it decentralization and having satellite locations? So all these questions are what they are asking. Again, we have no answers. We can plan out different scenarios, but the beauty of it is more than ever the realization that we need flexibility, and this agility, it's our only counteract to that uncertainty that we're all facing. So we have to kind of do it and work with them. And sometimes even we have to learn to be more flexible than we had expected to, because before that we're thinking businesses will know what they would need in 6 months, maybe not 3 years like the traditional landlords, but surely 6 months. The truth is right now, sometimes as we're planning the Great Return, which starts next week on the 2nd of June, we're trying to get a sense of, is it going to be 10% of our members coming back? Is it going to be 30%? And up till today, when we ask them, some of them haven't quite decided. We think it's going to be between 10 and 20%, but who knows? Because when we opened in Hong Kong, everyone came back. It was very quiet, but everyone came back right after they opened. They were craving for the connection. They were craving to be, even if it's in a room full of people who don't know, they want to be not knowing together.
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen, right? June 2nd would feel and look like. I have some physical recordings as well. I have to go into the studio, which is like, ooh, wow, how exciting!
How exciting!
But I guess for you as well as your tenants, did you find yourself having to sort of pull new skills, or perhaps and were you all thinking about where else you might have gone to perhaps be a little bit more inclusive about, how we create the space for perhaps potential new clients, maybe?
I think what's been interesting is there's, different groups of people that we, had expected them to be much later adopters of flex workspace, and they're starting to look at this. It could be, it could be the legal profession, it could be designers, nonprofits, social enterprise, so different types. And we're going on a journey to learn about their needs. And I think this circuit breaker has forced us almost to slow down. And this pause is helping us to really, force us to think about not the usual suspects. A lot of our business is technology and financial services, but actually everyone needs this flexibility, and how can we cater to them? So I would say it's a learning journey of even how to plan. Now we call it more broadly gathering. So it's not always meetings. Sometimes it's dialogue, it's gathering, smaller events for different groups. And there's so much more willingness to, collaborate, to partner, and to listen to the groups that you don't usually used to.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I can't wait to hear more. But thank you very much, Jaelle, for joining us and telling us about what's been going on at the Great Room. Next up, we have with us the Chief Marketing Officer at Bray Leino Splash, Miss Chang Lu-Lyn, and she's also the co-founder of this company. Hello, Miss Lu-Lyn.
Hello, Petrina. Thank you for having me.
So I know we've been sort of chatting informally about, this is your baby, this is your company that you've built from scratch with just the three of you, early in the 2000s, and it's become this sort of multinational now. It's grown from just the three of you, right, to this big sort of it's a tech company, right? You guys are an internet business. So in a way, we think of the tech and the internet sort of companies as being very nimble, being very sort of like, able to pivot and have been working from home. But what has the reality really been like for you guys in this time that you've had to manage such a massive operation?
Okay, so we're a digital marketing agency in the main, right? So because of the nature of the business, I think we've always had a habit of collaborating remotely. So, for example, we don't have a technical development team that is exclusively in Singapore. Our entire technical development team is hubbed out of Ho Chi Minh City, right? My entire creative, animation, illustrator, the writers, that team is completely hubbed in Kuala Lumpur. Realities of business, Singapore is very expensive to do business in and to hire, etc. So that's our business strategy. We have different hubs supporting our needs in different locations. So the staff in the other offices are very used to collaborating with their colleagues on platforms such as Skype, on Jira, on Tempo for project management, and I would have to say that the transition has been fairly easy, and there's not been any jarring disruptions to work. And the other thing also is that for a long time now we've had a flexible working arrangement at the office. Started really when I became a mother years ago, and I wanted to have a way to be able to spend time with my children but also contribute at work, right? So we completely support any of our staff members who need to work from home or to opt for a part-time working arrangement. And so I would say that that's really prepared us well for this transition, to be able to support everybody and have them on different platforms, but still collaborating, quite smoothly.
It sounds like you guys sailed through no issues.
Well, it's actually been 4 months now, right, since we've been working on. We started really, really early, right after Chinese New Year. We decided that it was safer for everyone to just not commute anymore and to start working from home. So regionally, across all 5 offices in Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Ho Chi Minh City, everybody was told to just stay put and work from home, right? But at the same time, also, we had to do a few things differently because it's a long time to not be in a physical space and working face to face, and so we had to be a little more mindful about how our people were working out mentally, right? So we had to make sure that we started doing more pulse surveys with them, which was something we never did before, right? Because when you're in a physical space, through body language, through mood swings, through tantrums and disagreements, you have it all out. But remotely, then we needed to send out these pulse surveys with our team, and we found out that actually, despite all that experience with working remotely, the pandemic does make people feel a little bit more isolated, a little bit more physically detached, and the survey did show that people wanted to have that social interaction. That was something that they missed, that they felt a little bit anxious about, and we really wanted to make sure that in that case we created a structured Friday CCA kind of activity where we called it a COVID company activity, where we would bring teams together, to go on virtual walks. It's right now they're in a room on Kahoot someplace playing charades for prizes. Then we're doing a cookathon together. So these little things that you actually have to put in place and have people participate so that they can have a laugh, see each other, and interact a little bit more, right? So things that previously we never used to do, because 5 o'clock people would just go for drinks together, or they'll want to go home or go to a yoga class together. But right now, we have to be conscious, and we have to actually, put people and resources to planning and getting these things going.
I love that. It's like me last night. I'm trying to enforce a movie night with my kids, and God, that ended in disaster. So it was like, first of all, just even the choice of movie was so fraught. So yeah, I completely applaud the massive effort that I think that you guys have had to sort of think about and do. But is there just one last question? I was wondering if this whole pandemic has prompted you to do things that you've never thought you would have to do, or that really sort of did it kind of send you in a bit of a existential crisis about what you are doing and what this whole thing is about?
I think one of the things that became quite apparent to us was that we have to actually make very conscious efforts to step up our game in terms of reaching out and communicating with our staff, right? And it's easy to think of it as, emails, Skype messages, or on Teams, but we've had to actually put in place weekly calls individually with our team members, do virtual town halls where we have everybody on a platform kind of listening to financial results, or how we're planning to save pennies and trim costs, and just to do that kind of thing, right? So definitely being a little bit more switched on about the frequency in reaching out to people, talking to them, checking in, all of those things, I think has brought a new momentum to the way that we work with our employees.
Thank you so much, Lu. Yeah, I think it's really fascinating to hear that. I mean, I'm hoping you're like everybody else is like you, and then really sort of looking out for their employees. And it sounds like that you're really doing above and beyond what most maybe other companies. But I'm hoping that this might inspire you, if you're listening, to think about that too. If you've not, I mean, I guess in this time, a lot of companies are working really hard to fight fires, right, and to just sort of get to the bottom line and sort of try and figure things out in a very, very real way. But for you guys to really sort of show the way and to sort of say that you're out there really looking after the well-being of your staff is very inspiring. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Lu-Lyn. Thank you. So please stay on the line. Also, Jaelle, please stay on the line. We're going to come back to you later. And I do love the idea of like virtual team walks there. So it was just fantastic, that idea. I want to bring into the conversation now Shashi Nathan, partner at Withers KhattarWong. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Laurindo. Thank you, Petrina, for inviting me to this podcast.
So I understand that you're a criminal lawyer.
Don't hold it against me.
And so can you give our audience a bit of a better understanding of what type of cases you normally handle?
I do basically everything to do with criminal law. So we do, I would say 70% of my work is white collar defense. So we do things like insider trading, market fraud, corruption, cheating, forgery, that kind of case. Casinos. Then I do blue collar work. I act for clients involved in murder, drugs, rape, sexual offenses. And I have a team that also does investigations. We do corporate investigations. So we help corporates do in-house investigations on maybe a rogue employee or financial misfeasance in the firm. Mm-hmm. So I've got my team of lawyers in my firm. They all do a little bit of that, and I help out where I can.
And how big is your team, just to help us get an understanding of
I have
your...
6 lawyers in my team, but we are in a much larger firm. We have 130 lawyers in the firm. And the firm is part of an international law firm where we have, I think, about 1,500 lawyers around the world. So I was listening to Jaelle and Lu-Lyn talk about the challenges. It's been a huge challenge for law firms generally, not just in Singapore, but across the world. My firm is, I wouldn't say it's unique, but we had some unique problems to deal with because we have offices in 18 cities, and we've got different time zones, different styles of working, different areas of law that they practice. So everyone has different needs and different ways how they've had to adjust to the pandemic. My colleagues in Milan, for example, when the pandemic hit Italy, it hit it really, really hard. I mean, I have some of my colleagues who got hit by coronavirus themselves. So emotionally, and because these people, it does bring everybody's mood down. Not just Singapore, but because they're partners of mine who I have known for many years, and they've been in hospital. One of them just got released from hospital recently. So you see how the infrastructure in different countries deals with the pandemic. And you try to find solutions in different countries.
But in terms of your Singapore team, are you 100% working remotely now, or is there some kind of exceptions to that rule?
So some of the work we do are considered essential services. So the government has allowed us some exemptions. So I have a skeletal team in the office, the finance team, some of the IT and infrastructure teams, they go in. And then individual teams of lawyers go in on an as and when they have to do so. So we need to get individual clearance when they want to go in. We have court. Although courts have been closed for 2 months, some hearings go on, especially hearings where a person's life or liberty is involved. So things like bail applications or someone's on death row, those cases are still going on. What we've done is that we've done all these hearings with Zoom.
Oh, wow.
So we've had to change the way we behave in court, because you don't know which camera is looking at you.
I'm so fascinated with that. How do you do a court
so what happens is
on Zoom?
It's been going. In fact, even the Court of Appeal, which is the highest court in Singapore, recently they've done a few cases on Zoom. So you'll have some judges sitting in the physical court, some judges dialing in from home. The lawyers usually dial in from home. The accused or the criminal is dialing in from the prison. The prosecutor is calling in from his office, and all the cameras are in. So what we haven't done is an actual contested hearing. Say we don't do a trial because I wouldn't be comfortable cross-examining a witness behind the camera. I want to see that person live. I think it can be done, but I don't particularly like to do it. If I'm going to question a witness, I'd like that person to be in front of me. I want to be able to observe his or her body language, his or her reactions to the questions and the environment. The camera does catch some of it, but you miss a lot of things when a person is behind the camera. You also don't know who else is in the room with that person, whether he or she has access to other information or documents. So we've not done trials or contested hearings. But yeah, appeals, other urgent matters, we've been using Zoom.
But do you think that could ever be in the pipeline, that we could get to that point where the trial process has actually gone virtual as well?
We've done it in Singapore already. There have been cases in Singapore where we try to procure a witness who is overseas and cannot come to Singapore for one reason or the other. And if parties come to a concession that, okay, we can't get him, rather than not having the trial, we'll allow him to give evidence by video. Not my preferred choice. Some other lawyers are okay with it, but sometimes you get to get the case moving, and the law allows for video evidence to be given, and of course you need the court to agree to that as well. But it's been given. Sometimes we get experts. Say you need a scientist or medical doctor who for some reason can't come, and he's not giving direct evidence on the case, but his scientific expert evidence. Those kind of cases, there's no issue of him giving evidence by camera, and there's no prejudice certainly. So I think we will have to look at each case and each witness differently.
So it sounds as though that the measures and the processes were in place. It's sounding almost like it was smooth sailing. I mean, did anything go unexpected given the pandemic?
No, I think it's been quite smooth sailing since we've all been on lockdown. The other aspect is not just court. I mean, we also, as a business, we have to be in regular contact with clients. I also have to have regular calls with my team of lawyers, with my management. So one of the things I find that's quite different is I spend a lot of time on calls every day. I use in the normal working day, I'll go to the office. I'll do work. I know some people don't believe it, but I do work sometimes, and then I still go around. I have a chat with my colleagues. I go down and have a coffee. The day passes by, and there's a flow to it. Here, I do an hour meeting, and the next thing I know, the next meeting is starting, and the next meeting is starting, and suddenly it's like 5:30 in the evening, and I've done like 5 or 6 meetings, and I actually get physically and mentally more tired than when I was sitting in the office and trying to do some work. So it's different, and it's different from going to court, because you go to court, you've got adrenaline. You're in the courtroom, you don't feel tired at all. But if you're sitting in the office in front of a computer, it does drain you, and I felt that personally for the last 2 months.
Yeah, many people that we've been speaking to also are saying the same thing. In theory, doing things at home should theoretically feel more relaxing, but also just these back-to-back calls and needing to compensate for that lack of physical interaction means that you're having to work harder just to stay engaged and really understand what's going on there. I'm curious, though, the one final question before we move to bring Carrie into the conversation, which is then if you're doing a lot of the court work virtually, how does that affect your wardrobe then? Are you able?
So something I've talked about with not just lawyers in my team, but other lawyers. I usually wear a black suit when I'm in court. And I know some of my friends, what they did was they wore a suit and a tie, but they wore their boxers below the camera. I was going to do that. But then my wife gave me a look and I said, okay. So I was at home. I had a full suit on, but no socks. And I did the argument. I wanted to do that just to make myself feel happy that I could appear in court in my boxer shorts, but my wife, who obviously makes the rules here, didn't agree.
I like how you went barefoot just to stay grounded. I mean, that was something very good.
I had to break a little bit of the rules.
I'm sure you're not the only lawyer who has tried that.
There were guys who've done it in their boxer shorts, but they sent me their pictures after.
Just what little thrills that can sort of get us through the day.
These small things make us happy.
I was trying to squeeze in one quick little question. I was curious to ask you about, now that you've gone through this whole experience, and maybe, moving forward, have you guys sort of tackled it as a business, and also maybe in terms of the legal system, how we can use the lessons from this pandemic to figure out what we can do a little bit more inclusively? I'm loving that I'm hearing that we can actually dial in, witnesses from overseas, which maybe would not have been an option before, but what else do you think could be done? And we were just sort of casually discussing, but what about?
It wasn't an option. It was always an option. It wasn't a popular option. But now reality is sunk in, and we have to use it unless trials get delayed. But when I saw this topic about inclusivity, I thought you were talking about our different industries and how inclusive we are of people. Is that off topic?
No, not at all. Totally on topic.
So I wanted to share one thing which I spoke to Petrina about very briefly, is that when I started practicing as a lawyer in Singapore 26 years ago, I didn't want to be a criminal lawyer initially, and somehow I fell into this route and I became a criminal lawyer. But one of the things that startled me was preponderance of Indian male lawyers who are criminal lawyers. You never hear of a female Chinese or male Chinese or female Malay lawyer who's at the top of the game for the criminal law practice. It's always some Indian male lawyer. And I didn't realize it until I entered the practice. And then, of course, over the years, it's true. I mean, I can look around and I know who are the main players in the game, and they're all male and Indian. And I don't think it's a question of race or stereotypes. It's a client perception. It's purely a client perception, because what I did about 12 years ago is that I started hiring females in my team. I have a good mix of male and female lawyers in my team, but I've probably got more females on my team than most of the other large firms.
Right.
And for them to do criminal law was already quite a big thing, because you don't expect a Chinese girl to be doing criminal law. They would do corporate or intellectual property or something sexier, but who wants to do blood and guts, right? So when I first introduced one of them has become already a partner in my firm. That shows how well she's done. But it was a bit of a jolt to the system, because you rarely see a female Chinese person doing high-profile criminal cases. And I felt that was important, because you need to change things. It's not a question of whether you can do it or not. Of course you can do it. The question is turning the mindset of the client. And this is difficult. The clients can be across the board. You can have Chinese, Indian, Malay, foreigners who are in Singapore, anyone. If they're in trouble for a criminal problem, they'll say, I want an Indian lawyer.
Really?
It's strange, but it's so I would sometimes bring in one of my young Chinese lawyers to sit in and say, look, this is my fee, but she's very good. She's been working in me, and this is her fee. Why did you consider? And this guy who has spent an hour telling me he cannot afford my fees, the moment I give him a slightly cheaper option, but she's very good, he said, okay, I'll pay your fees.
Wow.
Oh.
It's changing. It is changing, because I think you're getting more visibility now. But certainly when I first started, forget about the female Indian lawyer. I mean, she won't even get into the room for the client's benefit.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, this is
so. You have
fascinating.
male Chinese lawyers, no problem. They get a good fair share of cases, but the perception is client driven, not from the industry. The industry is trying to open up, want to get more people. And I want a wider skill set. I want people with different experiences, different viewpoints of life to come into the market, because that's the best way you can build your team, you see. But clients are the biggest hurdle.
Agreed.
And there are cases I have to, even if I don't want to do it, because I want to do something else, if you're going to keep the client, I have to get involved.
I'm so happy to hear that you're putting in extra time to do the client education work, because it is so sorely needed, not only in the legal profession, but also other industries as well, where they're trying to diversify their workforce. But at the end of the day, it's the clients who are kind of making a call. We want this person, not that person. So I'm so glad to hear that you're putting in those hard miles so early. Please stay with us as we move the conversation forward. I'd like to invite Carrie Tan to the show. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. And you're Executive Director of Daughters of Tomorrow. Is that right, Carrie?
Yes. Hi, Laurindo and Petrina. Thanks for having me on the show. Yes, my day job, I'm the Executive Director of Daughters of Tomorrow, which is a charity that enables livelihood opportunities for low-income women in Singapore. But for the purposes of this discussion, I would also like to mention that in my spare time, I volunteer with a social enterprise called Anesia that provides employer transfers for foreign domestic workers in Singapore who wish to change employers or after they finish a contract. And this particular social enterprise tries to provide this employment bridging without any cost or agent fees to the domestic worker. So why do I find that it's relevant for our discussion today? because I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the female or women's perspective in this COVID pandemic. And I think both groups of women, they form a very important part of our value chain when we're looking at the whole transformation of how our work life is going to look like in future.
So what are some of the things that you've been seeing? And I really welcome you to kind of talk across the different work and the different organizations that you are involved in. But what are some of the things that you've observed in how employers are reacting to the pandemic, with things with the lockdown, things with how some employees are having to be deployed, and how that impacts, the women that you are then also having to support as well? I mean, what are some of your observations?
So during the pre-COVID time, one of the biggest breakthroughs that Daughters of Tomorrow managed to create was in the area of retail and F&B sector hiring. Because for the longest time, these sectors practice this shift work rostering, right? And we finally, diagnosed the issue as to how come local women couldn't find or sustain jobs in these sectors. And it was because of childcare constraints, like because of the limitation of formal childcare hours to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., taking roster shift work in any industry wouldn't work for them. So actually, between 2018 to most recently, Daughters of Tomorrow has successfully converted many employers in these sectors to practice what we call core and stable scheduling, which basically means giving office hours to non-office jobs so that these mothers can go to work, get jobs in these sectors, and still be able to pick up their kids from childcare. But then, moving into COVID times, I think even in PMET jobs, we're seeing this office hours is disappearing because as people shift to working from home, our daily lives, our caregiving responsibilities, and our workplace responsibilities are all merging. And I've been hearing from many women how they are under the double burden of having to take care of both fronts, with the heavy expectation that whether it's from their bosses or from their co-workers of a faster response time, because you are from home, you don't need to travel, and you could be online all the time. And I think this is creating quite an unsustainable work practice that really we need to look into. So that's one particular area that, creating some time boundaries for the new normal of work, right? Then the other thing is also, of course, for the low-wage women that we work with, gone are the opportunities in retail and F&B for, the foreseeable few months. So we've already started pivoting our employment bridging efforts to channel them to the caregiving sectors like the elder care. The nursing homes are still operating. Our old people still need looking after, so there's still continuing to be positions there open for them. When we're increasingly starting to work with tech companies to ask them if they have openings for our women, we have seen some successes of having women take on home-based administrative jobs, as well as jobs in the AI sectors. So we're very encouraged, and I think with continued efforts to reach out to this group of employers, we are looking at breaking new channels of industries for job opportunities for the women.
That's great. I mean, so a lot of the changes that employers have been making during this time, particularly around being more cognizant of flexibility if you're a caregiver or you're a working parent as well, have been addressed with some more flexibility now, and I know that this is something that you've been advocating for a long time, and I'm just curious now that you're seeing at least a glimmer of hope with some of these changes being made. I mean, what's your take on that? On what's taken the employer so long?
Well, I think it's just very human. People are afraid of change, and I think you guys mentioned the culture of the Asian culture, right? It's so hard. Just not having visibility, I think, creates some anxiety in employers and bosses as well. It's going to require some adjustment, I think both on employer side and employee side. I wanted to kind of bring in a point that Jaelle made earlier about creating beautiful workplaces, right? And this is the point where I wanted to connect to our domestic workers, because in the new normal, our homes are going to be our workplaces. And the army of people out there keeping our homes beautiful, clean, organized, and conducive for everyone to stay together, cooped up, and productive and healthy is going to be our domestic workers. And our homes are their workplaces. And increasingly in the circuit breaker, we're seeing that the domestic workers are suffering a lot of stress because, that they can't go out even on their off days. And with all their employers being at home, adults, children, they have to cook 3 meals a day sometimes. They're running out of recipes. There's no clear communication of when they can rest, and even on their rest times, do they have the freedom to move around in the house? And these are all I think, things we need to think about, because I think without the domestic workers helping us at home as women, I think we will have a lot on our hands, right? Being parents and cleaning and caregiving and working. So I think this value chain is something that we need to look into, and employers can take the lead. I think whether it's in the office workplace or the workplace at home, employers can take the lead to carve out time boundaries, right, of personal time versus work time, personal space and workspace, so that it can be a more sustainable environment for the people who work for us, and hopefully for the people that we work with as well.
I'm glad that you raised the issue of domestic workers. I think that that's definitely a blind spot in the national conversation about the situation for migrant workers in the country and across the region as well. One final point before I hand it back to you, Petrina. In every episode, we ask our inclusion experts to imagine that they were bestowed with a world-changing magical power after the pandemic. So Carrie, my question to you is that if you were given this power, what are your top 3 things that you would do to make the employment sector more inclusive?
Wow. I wouldn't call myself an inclusion expert, and the things I wish for are not something that only employers can do. I think it's something that maybe we as a society can try to reimagine and create for the future. Number one is, I hope that we have more sustainable care structures in place. One example could be that we could have a contingent workforce of domestic workers and caregivers, so that when we have to let our own domestic workers go on break or on leave or rest, there is another pool of shared resource that we can tap into, and then we don't have to step in ourselves. Not that we don't want to, but it can be very draining. Number 2, I think creating a new framework for what is good work-life balance while working from home, I think will be tremendously important. In fact, I don't think that by having proper balance of personal time versus work time is necessarily detrimental to productivity. In fact, studies have shown that if you're able to toggle amongst different kind of activities that tap different parts of your brain, you can actually increase creativity in people, right? And problem-solving abilities. So I think there's an opportunity there for people to really think and reimagine how the new work would look like. And thirdly, it's in the grand scheme of things, probably a very tangible ask, is for companies who can afford it to consider subsidizing the telco subscription costs of their low-wage employees. Many of our women live in rental flats. It doesn't come with, fiber broadband. They're living off prepaid phone cards, right? And it takes a toll. This costs take a toll. And if you are providing a job to them in which they can work from home, I think to be considerate of this significant additional cost to their daily expenses and helping them with it would really go a long way to include them in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for these wonderful ideas, and I think very actionable. It feels like it can be done. Let's hope. Let's hope this conversation reaches the right ears. I'm just so glad you mentioned the domestic helpers, because I don't have one at the moment, and every day I look at the layer of dust all over everything, and I weigh it against what else I have to do, and I just go, let the layer of dust be there, because I guess I just can't be asked anymore. Do I want to scrub off that mildew? Maybe not today. What if it just gathers another centimeter and, we'll deal with it then, is usually my thought process. So if you can have a solution to this interim group of contingent cleaning workers that I can employ, I'll be very happy to contribute to that pile. My husband came out with a genius idea the other day of these dish washing services where you can collect all your dishes for the day, put it in a bag, and then tomorrow, like laundry, it comes back washed and ready to go. So another business idea for you.
We should discuss it. It can create jobs for the neighborhood, right? The
Right? Who else wants to do this? Yeah. I invested in a machine, so I've been using that since. But thank you so much to all our guests. Our last guest is also perhaps the most glamorous one. She is known as the glamour vintage songbird, Miss Lu. And I've really enjoyed watching you, not only live in person when you're performing in all your live venues, but of late you've been coming online to show us what we can do with some of this music and entertainment. Because obviously, as artists and as musicians, you have no venues to sing in and perform in anymore. So welcome, Payson and Miss Lu. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've done to sort of react to this pandemic?
Yeah, so hi Petrina, hi Laurindo. Thank you for having me on this podcast. So one of the first few things to go was the live venues and bars. Those were the moment that hit. I think my husband and I, we quickly had a discussion and we said, I told him, I think that it's going to get worse and it's gonna go down quite quickly. And then the weddings started getting postponed or cancelled, and we really had to huddle together as a team, because I co-found this company called Loud and Clear as well. So Loud and Clear is founded by my husband and myself, and right now it's a 3-person team. We have a technical personnel with us, and together we manage all of our live music. We also organize events, and we also manage all of the performance contracts and things like that for my husband and myself, because both of us are full-time professional musicians. So when the gigs started getting cancelled, we had to think of other solutions, and thankfully we were already on track to move a lot of our performances and our activities online. For example, from the start of November last year, I had already decided, okay, I want to kind of pivot to I want to do more of my own original material rather than, relying on the corporate events and the weddings, which have been a really, really good, has been sustaining my entire practice. So I had made a conscious decision last November, thankfully, to kind of do more things online, and that kind of set the tone for what quickly happened in January and February. Yeah, and I think at the beginning of the year, things were still pretty good with the event side of things. So call it divine intervention or something, but we thankfully had a lot of stores in our reserves to be able to tide through these next few months as we try to move things online. So because the events started dwindling, we already had our equipment ready with us, because my husband's other company provided these equipment for us to use for our live performances. And because we had this in place, we quickly thought of, okay, so now that this is not being used, how else can we convert it and continue our live performances to bring our music to audiences? So we quickly went to YouTube and looked up how to live stream, and we quickly went to places like Sim Lim Square before the circuit breaker kicked in to get all the equipment that we needed. And we looked at what we already had. Okay, we had this camera. How do we connect this to our computer? How do we go live from our studio? So this current studio that I'm recording this in right now, this used to be just a rehearsal room and recording studio, but now it's our live streaming studio. We've kind of converted it, same but different. Now we've built in the visual aspect into our daily workflow. yeah, so we had to quickly find the resources online, and many people were actually really quite happy to help. And we realized that, okay, now that we can live stream, this also opens up a whole new world, because we can actually, using a Zoom call, we can approach people, guests from overseas, bring them on the show, and you suddenly don't have those cost issues of what if I have to fly a guest in from the US, for example, where am I going to put them up? All those things disappear. And suddenly, with in light, there's the dark side of things, but there's also the really positive side if you choose to look at it. And that's how we chose to look at things. How can we get this going? How can we continue to bring music to people? And also for our own sanity, we needed to continue being creatively productive. And so thankfully, we started our own YouTube live stream show series. So I have one and he has one, and we recently did a 12-hour live stream where we invited guests dialing in from LA, from Thailand. We had Miss Grace Fu come on the show to talk about how we can prepare for things. Yeah, so it really makes me feel like, other than just being a musician right now, we have already tapped into our other creative outlets, like how do we program a show? How do we get our favorite guests, our favorite people onto the show without any geographical constraints? And yeah, now it feels like the world is our oyster. So really, there's a silver lining to this entire situation. And I think if you're willing to put in the work, yeah, you'll be able to.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I was very taken with what you were putting out online too, because I think for the other performers, they were either waiting out the situation, or they felt a lot of resistance to the technical aspects of being a performer, right? And maybe because you and your husband are a great sort of complementary team. I know he's a saxophonist, right? And also I think you're one of the few that are doing a subscription service to your performances and a pay per watch or something like that. So you're thinking about monetizing your performances, and I'm just curious as to how that sort of came about, and what was the response like, and is it sustainable? Do you feel like this is kind of like the way to go now?
So there are actually a lot of people, a lot of touring musicians who have really sustainable careers, even if most of us have never heard of them. And I think one of the turning points in how I viewed my career was, I forgot whose material it was, but I chanced upon someone's writing on how being a sustainable musician is more important than being a successful musician, because our view of what a successful musician or artist is usually like the pop stars, those who are at the top of their game. But there's so many other people in the layers underneath that who have very fulfilling lives. They tour, they record, they put out the music, they have audiences who love them, and that was the kind of career I wanted for myself. So from there, I actually discovered a website called Patreon. So that's where I first got the idea of the subscription thing. And what that does is basically people who like your creative output, who like your work, they get to support you directly by giving you either a monthly contribution or a per project contribution, depending on what you expect your output frequency to be like. So I thought, okay, if Patreon can provide that service, and I already have a website that has this service, I don't need to go on Patreon. If people already are familiar with this concept of Patreon, then I can start my own on my own website, and I offer exclusive perks to them. And in the same time, I get to build long-term relationships with my fans in that sense. I get to hear from them directly. I'm actually holding a Zoom call for the first time with my inner circle subscribers tomorrow afternoon to actually see who these people are, because they've been supporting me, they've been commenting, they've been requesting for songs, and all I've seen are their comments, but not their faces and their names. Yeah. So I think that it pulls me closer to them, and I get to directly offer them what they want.
That's so wonderful. I mean, it's always, I think as a musician on stage, you're I mean, you're there with your audience, but you don't really know. I mean, and most people are kind of shy to kind of come up to you and say, hey, you know, I really enjoyed that, blah, blah, blah. But this really gives you that intimacy and that direct link with the people who are literally, right, supporting you. So I think that is just so genius and such a quick and nimble, you know, move on your part to sort of take this and turn this into something that is really fulfilling and interesting for you. And I think I'm very much looking forward to this myself. You're having a Broadway night? Excuse me?
Yes. So
that's happening this Sunday, right? Is that right?
That's right. Sunday night at 8 p.m. Super excited about it.
Wonderful. Right. I'm not sure we'll be able to get this episode out before then, but we will definitely try and spread the word. But thank you so much, Ms. Lu, for sharing with us your journey. I'm before we get to hear your beautiful, lovely voice, and I don't know if you guys have heard this woman sing, but she is amazing. She also has such a beautiful look and presence, right? She has this really lovely sort of cat eye glasses, and she's always so glamorous, like sort of harking back to the good old days of, you know, the 60s. This is my favorite era. So it's really been so wonderful to watch you on stage and watch your growth as well as an artist. But before we get to your lovely song, I think we want to go back around again to our guests to ask them what is the one thing that they would like to sort of let our listeners know. What's the one thing that you'd like to share? So perhaps we'll start with you again, Jaelle.
Since we're talking about work, I think post-pandemic, what I like to see the workplace become is firstly to be much more respectful and more conscious about wellness. I think that would be one big thing I like to see. And second thing would be how workspaces really need to be the modern agora of learning. More than just a functional workspace, it needs to be a place of nurture, of growth, of learning from field experts who are out there in the field every day. That learning should be continual and must energize and rejuvenate our journey. And I think the last thing is, when we get the chance to meet with everyone in person, I really hope that it's not going through the motion. It'll be much more deeper engagement and much more appreciative of each moment that we have with each other. And I think if workplaces can achieve these three things, I'll be really happy about that.
Thank you so much, Jaelle. That's Jaelle, the co-founder and CEO of The Great Room. Next, I'd like to call upon Miss Chang Lu-Lyn from Bayer. What was it? The long company name again? I know your company is Splash. Yeah, what is the one thing?
I think contrary to what you hear about, the pandemic not being discriminatory, I think it does discriminate, right? It discriminates against all those people who are less privileged than us, less able-bodied than us, less well-off than us. And so what I would really like to see is if there are any employers out there, whether you're running a small business or a big corporation, to really look at stepping up the flexible working from home and the part-time work hiring policies that you have, because this will really enable people who are caregivers, mothers with children, and disabled people to be able to use their talents and be able to contribute and work at the same time and earn a living. And it's really not so difficult as the pandemic has shown us. So when business goes back to usual, that's one thing I think, that I would like to see.
Thank you, Lu-Lyn. So reiterating the point about flexible workplaces and providing that as an option for your team. So thank you so much for that. I'd like to move now to Shashi Nathan. What's one thing that you would like our audience to know after this conversation?
One thing that I think resonated very strongly with me during the last few months is the fact that I think many of us take a lot of things for granted. Our friends, the social groups we keep, our colleagues, the people we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And the last 2.5 months, I think it sunk in for me how much you miss that, how much you need that day-to-day interaction, that exchange of ideas, even just laughing around. Well, those things are important. And take on Lu-Lyn's point, not everyone has the benefit of doing that during this period. There are people who don't have that. Friends who send you delicious food regularly, or things like that. Those things are not just for this time of what we're going through. Those things are meaningful. They remind you how lucky you are that you've got good people, good friends around you. So the only thing I want to say is that when we go back, let's not forget that it's only in times like this that we remember who our friends are, the relationships we have, and because if you keep that in mind and don't take it for granted, when things go back to normal, you'll appreciate those friendships, those collaborations, those work relationships, and you will not maybe take it for granted as we all probably have done so in the past.
Thank you, Shashi. I mean, remembering not to take the people in our lives for granted I think is a very good reminder, especially in times like this. And we don't want this period just to be the end of that as well, right? So thank you so much. How about you, Carrie? What is one thing that you would like our audience to know?
I think this pandemic really throws up this situation where I think more and more people in society are going to start struggling because we don't know what the economy is going to look like and when it'll recover. In the past and so far, we've had this unconscious narrative of who are the deserving people in society, right? Are they deserving of more help? Are they deserving of assistance? Are they deserving of subsidies? And I hope that in the post-pandemic world, people can develop more empathy for the common experience of struggle, and I hope that the word deserving can be removed from our national vocabulary, and that everyone could fall into hard times and need help at some point. I think if we can extend our graciousness and generosity and kindness amongst those of us who can afford it and who are blessed enough to be able to afford it, we could do that. And the other thing is also to look out for our neighbors, instead of looking out as in like to report them. Maybe we should just look out for them and see whether we can help them. So I think this is an opportunity for people to come together, and we need to be very mindful of falling into very easy and tempting ways to become blaming, which is currently a crisis response, a natural human crisis response, but we can catch ourselves. And instead of blaming, let's be kinder to one another.
That was so well put. Thank you very much, Carrie Tan from Daughters of Tomorrow, and all our other guests, Jaelle Ang from The Great Room, Ms. Chang Lu-Lyn, Shashi Nathan, and of course, Ms. Lu. For more information on our guests and their work, make sure to check out the Inclusively website for details. And remember to like this podcast and submit a review. Your feedback will help us improve, and it's very, very welcome. Don't forget to like us on Apple Podcasts or follow us on Spotify or YouTube for notifications when we have got new episodes out.
Miss Lu will be sending us off today with a song. Can you give us a bit of a insight on what you'll be performing, and what was your inspiration for choosing this song?
So this song is called Fresh Air, which I think everybody sorely needs right now as we're approaching the end of the circuit breaker period. And the funny thing was that I actually wrote this at the beginning of the circuit breaker. And I had a vision. I thought to myself, wow, we're going to be stuck indoors for 1 month. At that point, it was supposed to be a month. And I thought, wow, this is something that we're all going to be craving and looking forward to. So I had already written half of this song, but I completed it with this in mind. And the chorus, which you'll hear later, says, loving you is like fresh air. And I didn't write being loved by you is fresh air. And it kind of reminds ourselves that we can be that fresh air for other people. We can be the change we want to see in the world, right? We can be the people to bring light to other people. So this is the kind of the love and the relationship and the neighborliness that we want to bring across with this song.
Thank you so much for that, Miss Lu. I think we're all looking forward to a little bit more fresh air and a little bit more love. So that's all for our show today. Miss Lu will be taking us out. But until next time, I'm Laurindo Garcia.
And I'm Petrina Kow. Thanks for listening.
You and I, we've got the kind of thing that everybody dreams about. Heart in the sky, but feet are on the ground. I never thought this could be found. So they say that we're all searching for our other halves. Now I see we're two whole persons. Half a fella's never enough. Loving you is like fresh air, fresh air. Fill each other up and all around. Fresh air, fresh air, freely given and abound. And so they say the grass is greener on the other side. But oh, if only they would water, their fields would be a better sight. Loving you is like fresh air, fresh air. Fill each other up and all around. Fresh air, fresh air, freely given and abound. When skies get darker and we wonder if we'll weather the stormy twists and turns, let us not squander our love and be each other